Hi, this is Abby.
And this is Anna.
And in this presentation, we are going to continue exploring our complaints and how to transform them into commitments. If you don't already have it out, you will need your Navigating Complaints to Commitments worksheet that you
Recall that the first question we asked you to address was about your complaints. Essentially, those things that you can't stand, and if they were to change, your life would be better. You should have a list of these complaints, and they should be recorded in the column 1 of your Navigating Complaints to Commitments worksheet.
The second step of the process was meant to help you find the underlying commitment or value in your complaint. Recall that addressing this question reveals what you stand for or are committed to and is being overshadowed by your complaint. Your responses to this part of the process should be written in column 2 on that column sheet. When we find a value or commitment in our complaint, this is the moment where we shift our language from complaint or victim, that this complaint is happening to me, to empowered or commitment language, that this is what I stand for and why this situation is a problem for me.
If you remember, question 3 was really about taking personal responsibility. This is taking responsibility for what it is that you're doing to support manifesting what it is that you're committed to or your value, in contrast to what you are doing that hinders that success or that alignment with your value. The goal of this question really is to gain awareness for the personal power that you have to influence the situation. You can do that by identifying the things that limit us from creating what we want to do in our lives. This particular question really is about supporting our value and realizing what it is that I'm doing and not doing that allows me to be in alignment with my value.
Before we dive into the pool that is question 4, let's talk about what gets in our way of making positive changes that allow us to achieve what we're committed to or value. What are the things that concern you or that you're afraid of occurring if the situation changes? Sometimes this discomfort is about our additional commitment to protecting ourselves or preventing harm from coming our way. This creates what Keegan and Leahy call a competing commitment. For example, although I'm committed to being honest, I may also be committed to protecting myself from being judged by others if I speak my truth. This fear of being judged gets in my way of being willing to be honest with people. If you consider changing these behaviors, the ones that are getting in the way of your commitments or values, do you experience a sense of concern or fear, maybe some discomfort? Remember that this sense of discomfort is not right or wrong. It is simply a cue that you are considering something different. And as humans, change tends to be scary. These competing commitments are getting in the way of you taking action to do something to manifest your values. To make authentic and potential revealing changes, we need to explore the competing commitments that get in the way of handling our complaints.
What is difficult about these fears, Abby, is that until we're honest with ourselves about them, we can't address them or change them. Many of the fears are common and normal, and until we explore them, we often aren't even aware they exist, or that we're taking action according to this other value.
That's so true, Anna, because the reality is we all have complaints. That's normal and natural to be dissatisfied, but it's what you do with those complaints at the moment of tension that determines your results.
We realize that people often get stuck here, so we've included this table of values that have frequently come up as we have navigated this process with other groups, as well as the competing commitments those participants discovered they had, to help you in your personal exploration of the competing commitments occurring in your complaint cycle.
The one single denominator in all of our complaints is ourselves, which is actually the exact same thing we have the power to change. Because everywhere we go, there we are. So go ahead at this time and pause the presentation to capture your thoughts about this question in your personal notebook or journal. Now that you've had time to answer the previous question regarding your fears or concerns, now you are going to identify exactly what you are committed to that competes with the value or commitment you entered in the second column. This competing commitment should cause you some sort of discomfort that may be related to fear, concern, or anxiety. Something that makes you feel uneasy and stops you from taking action. In the fourth column, entitled Competing Commitments, please respond to the prompt, I may also be committed to. Go ahead and pause the presentation now and take the time to enter your response in column 4.
A key thing to notice is how columns 2 and 4 are always in tension. My intended commitment or value is in column 2, whereas my competing commitment is in column 4. My competing commitment will always get in the way of the value I stand for if I allow it to do so.
Exploring competing commitments is not about the gotcha syndrome or outing yourself for disalignment. Instead, it reveals how self-protection reduces our effectiveness with other things we want. We aren't intentionally acting against our commitments or values that are listed in column 2. We are instead looking at the source of the competition for our commitment so that we can address it.
For every individual commitment or value, there is another competing commitment that prevents alignment from happening.
Holding together the contradiction between competing commitments and values can create a system with dynamic parts. When our competing commitment and our values are in static equilibrium, meaning there's no flow between them, tension is created, resulting in a resistance to change. When you feel that tension, that's a great opportunity to take it on and step into growth.
So, if I don't take my complaint on in order to be in alignment with my value, I empower the competing commitment.
Right. And if I do nothing, I am choosing not to choose, and that also empowers the competing commitment.
It may feel like we haven't solved anything when our competing commitment is revealed. In fact, Abby, don't you think it can make things seem a bit worse because we are more directly relating to the problem?
Yeah, Anna, I agree. So what it does is it creates dynamic equilibrium. It releases the tension by allowing the competing commitment to flow with the value. Only by seeing why it's impossible to change do we have a better chance of actually making change occur, which leads to the next part of the process.
In order to learn the truth about a complaint or to expand our perspective, we have to engage or inquire about the situation, which can be challenging. We often make lots of assumptions to inform our decisions. The assumptions we make hinder our ability to take action to create change.
As we explore our competing commitments, we can begin to look more closely at the underlying factors that are driving them. It's not just that we have a fear or concern that's getting in the way. We also tend to make assumptions about what will happen if the competing commitment comes to be. And these tend to be worst-case scenarios.
So right now, take a moment to review the competing commitments you identified in column 4. What underlying assumptions come to mind that are related to the competing commitments you identified? Often these assumptions take the form of an if-then statement. If I do blank, then blank will happen. And often what we fill in the blank with is not desirable. For example, if I have a fear of being wrong, it may reveal my commitment to being right. What assumptions might lie beneath my commitment of being right? I assume that if I am not right, then I will lose the respect, status, or power. I will be revealed as a fraud, or I will have to admit that I do not know enough to do this job well. In a moment, you'll have an opportunity to write about your assumptions in the 5th column on your worksheet. What's important about this process is that you let your responses flow. Don't try to edit or alter your responses to make them look or sound better. Allow what's real and rising in you to be revealed on the paper. Go ahead and pause the presentation to capture your thoughts in column 5 at this time. The problem with assumptions is that we believe that they are true, and they may not be. When our assumptions are not true, this can create an uncomfortable situation.
Sometimes it's easier to make the assumption than it is to challenge ourselves to take a risk and see if that assumption is true. Take a moment, consider how your assumptions about your complaint support you. Are you willing to get uncomfortable by testing the validity of these assumptions to have a positive impact on your complaint situation?
Take an additional moment to consider how your assumptions are undermining your values. What is the price you are willing to pay for what passes for being comfortable? Can you see the relationship that develops between your assumptions and the competing commitments you encountered towards achieving what you are committed to?
The point is not about whether it's right or wrong to make assumptions. The point is that we make them often without being aware that they're assumptions. When we become unconscious to how we're choosing, we may even believe that we're not choosing. It's just the way life is. So we're inviting you now into an awareness about how you interact and an awareness about what you're willing to safely and modestly risk.
Don't let the assumptions be the driver, because if you do, it's a big price, and the price is your value. Are you willing to give up that?
When you become aware of your big assumptions and your competing commitments, that's when you have the opportunity to take action and create change, rather than simply reacting to your complaint. So how does doing this, becoming aware of previously unconscious assumptions, help you honor what you value?
It allows you to take personal responsibility for the situation, which expands your influence and supports you with living into what you value. Often, when we are overwhelmed by the competing commitments and big assumptions, we become resigned, or refuse to play, or simply check out of the situation. Yet, this choosing not to choose is in fact a choice, even if it's not a conscious one, and it has ramifications.
Shifting from a reactive complaint to utilizing choice allows you to create a proactive change, which is a new type of communication and language around the complaint situation.
Question 6, or the column 6 on your column sheet, is the last piece of this complaints to commitments process. So using the complaint that you've been working through from the beginning, what we really challenge you to think about now is how can you take this on? What is a safe and modest risk that you are willing to take to address your competing commitments and your big assumptions? If you think about what you have filled in for those two particular columns, what action can you do to address your competing commitment and to test to see if your assumptions are actually true or not? What are you willing to do to create change surrounding the complaint that you have and to be in alignment with the value that you've identified? Take just a couple minutes to write down in column 6 what your safe and modest risk that you're willing to take to address your competing commitments and assumptions, what it is. Go ahead and, as you end this PowerPoint, write that safe and modest risk in that column. You will need this for further going on with the process.